Absolutely. We're ready. Where's the energy? Are we ready? Yeah. Thank you. It is early. It's god awful early. Didn't anyone stay up to like the middle of the morning, like 3, 4 in the morning? Yeah. Why are we here? I don't know. See, I really should have waited a couple minutes. Come on in. Are you guys ready? Woohoo! This talk is playing doctor, which I'm sure means nothing. Right? That's a pretty innocent term, playing doctor.
It totally is.
It totally is.
No undertones whatsoever.
No. We're going to be talking about some lessons the Blue Team can learn from doctor-patient engagement. I'm going to throw up a number here. You guys recognize this number, 2 million? Does this number mean anything to anyone? No one's seen it? Nothing. That's the number of money that I'm going to, no. 2 million is the number that ISACA is saying there will be unfilled IT security jobs in 2020. Now, I run a thing called the Academy where we recruit people like, 2 million jobs will go unfulfilled. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. You really think there's going to be 2 million unfilled jobs in 2020? You really think that we're even going to still be having these great conferences in 2020? I don't know. I really don't know, because let's face it, as security professionals, no one really likes us, right? It's worse than the Department of No. Like, I went to a customer visit on Thursday coming down, and the guy was showing me around. I was like, yeah, this is Wolf, and he's into security, and this is the guy who's going to be point person. The guy's like, what'd I do wrong? I'm like, no, it's okay. We're just going to go to lunch. Well, what's this about? Lunch? What else is it about? I mean, that's what instant paranoia. Like I was at Line, same day, I went at lunch, and I pulled my phone, and everyone's like turning off their phones because I'm going to hack them. No one likes the security professionals. We like it, right? We have a hell of a lot of fun. We love what we do. This conference is awesome. I was telling Steph, I went with one of her conferences, and there was no one dressed up. There was no drunk and disorderly. There's no video games.
We had coloring books.
They were coloring books. That was kind of cool. But like, we have a great field, and we have a lot of fun. But I'm really, really concerned about its long-term future. I don't think we'll get 2 million. I think they'll replace us with machines because we are so hard to deal with. We're going to be exterminated. So I was concerned about that. I'm like, I don't want to be exterminated. I love this community. What can I do? So I was looking for some interesting talks, looking for some ways to get out of the echo chamber, and I came to this guy at Circle City last year. Here's the YouTube. Don't watch it now, but you can get the YouTube. Dr. Hume gave a talk called Turn Your Head and Cough. Dr. Hume gave this talk at Circle City last year. I love this talk. This is like the sequel to this talk, but this is like the sequel that you guys go to and they change the actors, and you're like, wait a minute, where's the guy I liked? So watch this talk. It's a great talk if you haven't seen it. But he brings out why and how security professionals are like doctors. There's things like, hey, we all have patients. We all are giving diagnosis when we do reviews, right? We're all dependent upon those patients to follow the things through. And we see a lot of people, right? There's a lot of work in information security. And patients are a lot like users, right? They lie. And they don't listen. And I thought it was a really good analogy. And especially because, so much of what doctors do is like us in terms of our success depends on what others do, right? We can't dictate and hold the hands and make the security professionals or the users do what they need to do. Doctors can't dictate and do what the patients need to do. So I was telling this to staff, and I'm like, hey, baby, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And of course, that means patient engagement and Blue Team security. And so I'm like, this is kind of cool because what she does with doctors all the time really leads well into this. So as introduction, you guys probably know me. I'm Wolf Gorlick. I do strategy stuff. There's my website. And you are?
I'm Stephanie Schaefer-Pond. I know nothing about security, very little about computers. I'm really, really good at Facebook. That's the extent of my tech knowledge. But I'm the principal consultant at Zavira Consulting, which I started several years ago with 3 main goals in mind. I wanted to help business owners become more engaged in their communities. I wanted to help philanthropists, donors, and funders be more effective in how they use their dollars. And I wanted to help service providers become more impactful in the work that they were doing. Now, the service providers, for me, about 90% of my practice is doctors. Right now, I work with 480 doctors, that was fun, across 23 specialties. And what I do is I really work with them to learn how to be better people. My background is in cognitive behavioral therapy. I have a master's from Wayne State. And for those that don't know what CBT is, it's all about changing people's minds reshaping their thoughts, reframing how they perceive and think about things in order to move them from where they are to where we want them to be. So that ties really nicely into working with doctors and with service providers, because often their interactions with patients are hampered by the communication piece. It's getting them to buy in to all of the stuff that they need to understand and agree with in order to then follow through on the healthcare treatment plans that are put in place to keep them alive. So in my world with the doctors, it's all measured. The Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services has actually started reimbursing healthcare providers based on how satisfied their patients are. Not entirely, they still get paid for the work that they do, but a portion of their income is now tied to patient satisfaction surveys. And they're looking at, are your patients happy? Not with their health, but with your communication, with your responsiveness, with how much they think that you care about them. All these warm, fuzzy things that most doctors didn't go to med school because they cared about. If they cared about the warm fuzzies, they would probably be nurses or social workers. Doctors became doctors because they like to solve puzzles, not because they're warm fuzzy. Some of them are. There are some specialties that have their own personalities. But generally speaking, the idea that we're going to be paid based on how happy our patients are was anathema. Especially when you look at the fact that the playing field that they're running on is really, really tiny. Anybody that is below 94.1% in patient satisfaction is in the bottom 50% of all providers nationwide. The difference between being in the bottom 50% and being in the top 10% of doctors across the country is 2.7%. So a lot of times the people that I'm working with are like, well, what's the point? You're talking tenths of percentages. You're talking such a narrow margin of error. If I have one or two surveys that aren't happy with me, that's going to throw my score off and I'm not going to get my incentive pay, or my Medicare reimbursement rates are going to go down. So I started looking at the data. I started tracking my providers' scores before and after working with me. And what we found is that when they actually start using patient engagement strategies, they saw an improvement in their scores of about 1.24%. Which seems really tiny, except they're playing on a 2.7% big playing field. That's huge. And all of it comes down to, how do we communicate? How do we interact? How do we build rapport and those warm fuzzies that have people feeling like we're not just there to solve the problem, but we're there to care about them too. In other words, I'm a don't be a dick instructor. That is 90% of what I do. I teach people, particularly doctors, how to not be dicks with the people they interact with. So what does that mean? My favorite don't be a dick story, his karma is actually being my prime dick example in every presentation I do for all time, was a urologist that I was shadowing. We were having a decent day. I was following around the practice, doing things. He was in a patient exam room, and I heard screaming, blood curdling, full throat, somebody's being murdered screaming. Patient's coming down the hall, freaking out. She's demanding to see the doctor. She was not scheduled to see the doctor. She was scheduled to see the nurse, but she wanted to see the doctor. So he and I go in. She's sobbing. She's there for a procedure that he had scheduled for her. Very first thing she says to him when we walk into the room is, you did not tell me what this was going to be like. You did not explain this at all. She didn't realize that the nurse was the one doing this procedure on her, not him. She was terrified. Does she know what she's doing? Has she done as many as you have? Is it going to hurt more because it's a nurse and you're the doctor? And you went to med school, so you know how to do this better, right? And is it going to hurt? And how long is it going to take? And, and she's getting more and more worked up. And finally, she's sobbing. And she says, my sister died of cancer. And right before she died, she brought us all together and she told us, and he cut her off right there and changed the subject. Yeah, don't be a dick. It gets better though, because when we left, without him ever explaining what the procedure was going to be, without him ever apologizing for having not explained it the first time, without ever having reassured her, the minute that door shuts, he looks at me, rolls his eyes, and goes, she has a behavioral health issue. I think she's schizophrenic. And I stopped him and I said, you know what? Somebody can be schizophrenic and be afraid. Somebody can be schizophrenic and be angry. Somebody can be schizophrenic and be in pain. Somebody can be schizophrenic and be mourning. Nothing that you just told me negates anything that she just said. Just because somebody's crazy doesn't mean they're wrong.
Right, so you think about something like patient engagement and that story, right? I'm here to solve someone's problem, make them healthy and whole. And you're like, but they're fucking crazy. Can we think of like 1,000,001 stories? The minute I heard that, I'm like, you know what, there's this time where we're trying to help this user, and I'm like, they kept saying, blah, 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 blah. The antivirus came through the air and attacked me, blah, 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 blah. Didn't you guys infect me with a link one time? And wasn't that like linked to Skype? So should I download GoToMeeting? I'm like, these people are crazy. They're driving me nuts. The ability to kind of get beyond that and still make that connection, still listen to them, is really key if we're going to drive some behavior. Because when you think about it, we want to drive behavior with the crazy user because they're the ones who are going to click on the link, right? We don't want them to get infected. We want to drive behavior with the IT guy who's absolutely terrified and hiding from us because he's the guy who's going to patch the server and hopefully apply some CS controls. We want to make friends with the developer and not be like, God, those developers. Because they're the ones who are going to write the secure code or leave the vulnerabilities in place. We want to make friends with the operations guys because they're the ones who are going to segment the network and protect the industrial controls. And the ability to get beyond thinking they're crazy is absolutely vital to popping balloons. Which might not make sense, but follow me through here. This is like my favorite analogy right now. When you think about how criminals move through the networks, so oftentimes they're like, oh, we'll just put controls everywhere. But if you think about it in terms of a path, right? I like the tower defense. Balloon tower defense is like my security go-to right now. I'm like, are you playing Blue Tower Defense? No, I am doing security work. But as the attackers move through the network, they're following a very finite plan. And that finite plan, that finite path, has multiple points along it where people can jump in and do something to stop them, right? But it's not us. We're not going to be all over that place. It's the people that we engage with, the people that we get beyond thinking they're stupid, the people we get beyond thinking they're crazy who are going to stop the balloons. And if we don't,
You are suggesting that monkeys using this.
Yes, and I'll get back to that. I am suggesting they're monkeys. Great analogy. But I'm also suggesting if we don't get the monkeys on board, 99 red balloons are going to go by. And no one wants to be singing that song. So we need to get to a point where we're looking at things like empathy, we're looking at things like the ability to inspire and instruct. We need to get to a point where we're creating effectively a volunteer security organization because we can't do it. There's no possibility we can do it alone. Much like doctors, right, cannot go and follow on the patient, make sure they take the meds. We need to be the ones doing that. We need to be the ones who get beyond saying the users are crazy to the pact where Tron saying we're fighting for the users. And that's what I was very excited about patient engagement.
So I'm terrified of needles. Absolutely terrified of needles, which means I picked an awesome career field to work in because I'm in doctor's offices all day, every day. Also, blood makes me queasy, tend to pass out all day, every day, doctor's offices. Which actually is a good thing for me because it keeps me mindful of the fact that every one of our patients, every client that we interact with is scared of something. They're there because they're scared. Nobody goes to the doctor to be reassured that, no, you're right, all's good. You are absolutely correct. You are perfectly healthy. I'm so glad I was able to validate that for you. People go in because something's gone wrong, and they're scared when they get there. I was visiting a rheumatologist who they do autoimmune diseases, usually arthritis, lupus, that sort of thing. Had a patient with arthritis. Wanted to start him on a medication that we've all heard about because they advertise it on TV constantly, Humira. Which they advertise it on TV and it sounds like, hey, just go to your doctor and you'll get this pill and it'll be all good and we'll fix it. It's fabulous. And you'll be running on the beach or walking through wildflowers, whatever the fuck those commercials are. This doctor said, you are probably going to degenerate. That was the word he used. To the point where you can't move. It's going to be painful. It's going to be terrifying. It's going to be devastating to your home life, your relationships, your ability to work. He used these really scary, scary words, probably 6 or 7 times. I was making a list. And then he goes, I want to start you on this medication. This is really the best thing for you. This is what's going to be what stops this in its track. This is what you need to keep your life on track. Here's the thing though, it costs about $20,000 a year. So whenever I make a prescription for this, we automatically ask you to bring in all of your financials because we'll help you apply for a grant, for a subsidy from the company that makes Humira. And if we can't get that for you, well then you can't get Humira. But don't worry, there are other things that might kind of work too. I could watch the patient's wife like cringing into herself the more he talked. And afterwards, I debriefed with my doctors. This is what I do. I'm like, the compliment sandwich. You did really good at telling them he had arthritis, and then you sucked for about 45 minutes, and then you did really good at telling them goodbye. So we're doing the debrief. And I told him, I'm like, I'm all about reality checking and making sure that people know that and understand the ramifications of their situation. But you said devastation. You said destructive. You said like lifetime of constant pain unless we can get this mid-sized new car subsidized for you every year forever. Like, that was really scary. And his face lit up. And he went, I know, I was trying to do that. I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. He goes, well, this is the patient that like really needs it. Like the other patients that we saw today, I don't care if they come back. And he told me that, which is a problem in and of itself. But he goes, they don't have to come back, but this one needs to be here. So I wanted him to really understand the gravity of the situation. So I wanted him to be really, really scared. That way he'd come back. I said, human nature is to run away from the things that we're scared of, right? So if you want him to come back, maybe don't create an environment of terror. He's like, oh, hadn't really thought about that. So how we approach fear in our patients and our clients, how we handle that, how we give them a good sense of the reality of their situation without creating such terror that they run for the hills is crucial to the work that we do in both fields.
All right, so I'm going to pick on the back row. Congratulations, back row. You're now my board of directors. Start from there or to there. You can be the chairman because I think you came in about, yeah, you're the chairman. Board of directors, we need to pass $1 million capital expenditure. We need to upgrade these firewalls. You guys may have seen the press. If we don't do this, the Chinese are going to come, and the Chinese are going to steal our intellectual property. They're going to steal the money you have. They may even steal your grandkids' blood. Will you please approve? Just sign on this line, okay? Because it's just $1 million, and it would be so much better. And then next year, I'm going to come and I'm going to say, hey, board of directors, the Chinese. We kept them at bay for a year, but I need $750,000. Did I mention your grandkids' blood last time? Because we wish that. How often do we do fear, uncertainty, and doubt? It's terrible. It's terrible in this industry how much we do it. Now, there are some good ways to do fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that is by creating some fear and uncertainty and then addressing the doubt. But so oftentimes we resort to the worst possible condition and scare the hell out of them thinking that will get us money. And in pop psychology, that's talked about in terms of shifting people to a reptilian brain. Have you guys heard about this? Right? We're going to scare them so bad, they're going to go all out reptile. Right? Because America will defeat the Chinese. But like, well, maybe move like one brain forward, right? So after the reptile brain, we were so freaking scared. The next step up, monkey, thank you, is the monkey brain, right? Maybe a little like friendly monkey doctor brain. And the monkey is a little bit better at thinking what's going on, a little bit better at deciding what to do, and not so scared. They'll still throw poo at you probably, but not so scared. And then of course the cortex, being Spock, right? That more of the logical brain, which is where we can have a good discussion as to what really are good decisions. When we think about FUD, so oftentimes we throw people all the way to the reptile brain, and then we're like, okay, now give me money. And at that point in the time, like, I want Ronald Reagan right now. We're going to go after the Chinese. It's terrible. What we really need to do is create some fear and uncertainty. A little bit, I get that. Here's the reality of the situation. And then slowly shift people back into that monkey mode, right? Slowly shift people into that human mode. Because no reptile is actually going to be able to resolve it. Plus the stress is too much. So when we have the balloons and they're going, we want to get people at least past reptile. We don't want to scare the hell out of them. Let's give them some ability to make some good decisions. And then let's equip them to put in the right place and the right controls. Things like I said, like server patching and applications and segments and whatnot. What we ultimately need to do is line up those monkeys. Which sounds great, line up the monkeys. But how the heck do you line up the monkeys? How do you get to that point? How do you get people, once they know the consequence, to be ready to listen to you and be ready to engage?
So you start getting them to listen to you by listening to them. A huge part of the coaching that I do is just about listening. Family practice doctor I saw. She had a brand new patient, first time they'd ever met. She was doing the initial whole long questionnaire. She's like, so what brought you here? What brought you to Michigan? And this woman started telling her a story about how she and her family, her parents, had survived Katrina. And they'd gotten separated during Katrina, and her dad and her mom came up to Michigan, and she stayed in Louisiana. Mom passed away. Her dad was diagnosed with dementia. So she came up to take care of her dad. And as she's telling the story, she goes, it's really been hard because I don't know anybody here. And this is a pretty rural part of Michigan. And my dad doesn't always know who I am. So there are times when, I'm making him breakfast and all of a sudden he's attacking me because he thinks I'm an intruder in the house. And he gets really physically aggressive with me and I don't know how to handle it. And I don't know who to talk to and I don't know what the resources are here. And it can be really difficult. And this doctor had been making really good eye contact and nodding and doing all that good nonverbal communication that I coached them on. And she goes, oh, do you smoke? So often we listen, but we're one step ahead. Usually we listen with responses in mind. We're already kind of throwing those pills before they answer the question. My back hurts. Oh, that's probably. My foot hurts. Oh, that might be. My computer won't. Oh, I already know what that is. We're not listening actively. We're not listening to understand. We're listening to respond. And we're forming those responses and we're forming those opinions before we've even really fully heard the story. Really good example of this is in the show Scrubs, which I use in all the trainings that I do. Because a couple years ago, the JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, did a survey of doctors, and they said of all the medical shows on TV, St. Elsewhere, House, Chicago Hope, ER, all those, what's the most accurate show, what most accurately reflects your experiences as a doctor? Overwhelming response, Scrubs. Reason why is because when the show was on the air during their hiatus seasons, the writers would actually travel around the country to hospitals and sit with residents and go, so tell us stories. What's happened? It really is very accurate. And it's funny when I present to doctors, I don't tell them that up front. I say, JAMA did this survey. What do you think the answer was? And I've never once not had a room full of doctors go, Scrubs. So what does it look like when we're listening to answer, when we're listening to throw the pill, to solve the problem, rather than to actually understand and get all the pieces that we need? Kind of looks like this.
Guys, how are you? I'm great. You know me. And then some fashion Nazi on the E network says that pear-shaped people shouldn't wear stripes. And whoosh. Guess who's ear deep in mint chocolate chip ice cream?
Lovely. Should we skip it?
Can you guys hear it?
On the counter for an hour, you can just drink it like a milkshake. Except watch out, if that block's not totally melted, hit you in the face. And one time I got chunky monkey in my eye. Brings Miss Tracy to us. Her landlord had her passed out on our floor.
Lucky me, I couldn't pay my rent
Should
this
we
month.
just keep going?
A recent study found that
Keep
doctors
going,
spend
listen.
an average of 15 seconds listening
Keep
to a
going.
patient.
We can't
Sounds
do that.
insensitive, but the
Skip.
truth is, it's all the time you need. How you feel?
So moving on. The
The
point is
bonus
that,
for keep going.
no, we're not going to keep going. Nobody can hear it. I could act it out because I've seen it like a million times. If you guys want, like, the...
Act it out.
So this is what it looks like. They make a point about how doctors only really need to spend about 15 seconds with their patients. And there's a little timer in the episode, throughout the episode, whenever they're interacting with their patients, it's being timed. And they're counting down. Usually about 7 of those 15 seconds consistently is with them talking about something. Talking about ice cream, talking about interior design, talking about a letter that they just wrote to an ex-girlfriend. It's not really what she wants to talk about. What she does get a chance to say in those few seconds, they go, okay, we're working on it, we gotta go. And consistently throughout the episode, their patients are going, oh, okay, I'm here. At the end of the episode, which I'm not gonna act out because it's been a long time since my 8th grade summer camp in theater,
You got it. Come on, do it.
I'm suicidal. They realized that if they had listened to their patient, if they had put all those 15 seconds together, why don't we keep what they thought was a medical condition was actually self-inflicted. She'd been going through a lot. She was getting evicted. Her fiance had dumped her. She didn't have anybody in her life that was supporting her. And what they thought was an environmental exposure to a toxin turned out to be a suicide attempt. So when I show that to doctors, people are like, wow. One time I had a doctor go, that would never happen. We wouldn't go back. We only have so much time. We don't have time to listen to their stories. When we've done time usage studies, it takes people about 2 minutes to tell you everything they want you to know. From the, oh my God, how long has it been? You work in the other building. I never get to see you. How's things in your department? I'm really good. Look, see the picture? My kid just finished her dance recital and it's been amazing. And my son's going to Boy Scout camp and like he's really nervous. And anyway, how have you been? That's awesome. So this is what's going on with my computer. All the stuff that we don't think we have time for takes about 2 minutes. Which I always say to my doctors, and it's relevant to you guys too, if you invest those 2 minutes up front, it saves you 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 years on the back end. But we have to take the time to listen and to get that full story first.
Who loves small talk? Anyone in the room like really good at small talk? God, I'm terrible at small talk. I have a sales guy. He's just great. Send him in. He does the 2 minutes, and I come in. No, but you know what I mean? It's like, hi, I'm here to solve your problem. Like, yeah, thanks so much. No, just give me your computer and don't talk to me. We had a client who kept getting infected, and we would push back out the AV, and they get infected again, push back out the AV, and get infected again, push back out, and again and again and again. And the man's help desk was like, maybe this woman's just lonely. How does she keep getting infected, right? And they call her up. She'd be like, yeah, I was doing, and can you open up the support link, please? All right, reinstall the AV. Finally, it got to a guy who had been relatively new and had some time. He's like, so what have you been doing? Oh, is that how your computer works? What's the error message you're sometimes saying? Oh, can I log back in and take a look at the back end? What had happened was her computer was set for like deep freeze. So every time it would reboot, it would undo all the support changes. And then she was going to the same couple websites that were known to distribute malware, and the way she was using the internet, 2-3 days she'd be infected again, right? No one listened. This went on for months before someone was like, what was going on again? Can you run that by me again? So we don't listen well in security. We don't listen well, and we don't do small talk well, which makes it really hard to line up the monkeys. The other thing, too, is returning a sense of control. So not only trying to figure out, okay, we got this problem, what is it? We got this problem, how can we empower you to make sure that you can make a positive change? How can we create a situation where you can take some control, right? Because that's another reason why, generally, people don't like IT and IT security people. We're the ones who inflict controls and say, thou shalt do X. I had lunch with a CISO who was telling me, this is great. I completely solved security. Really? How'd you do it? We came up with a 17-step process for how they receive email. That's good, I guess. Yeah, anytime they follow these 17 steps, and like, oh my God, I would not want to work at that company. How do we return self-control? You got a story on this one?
I'm full of stories.
I know.
That's my job here. I'm the depressing story fairy today. So, people usually want to know how I started doing what I do, because not many people get paid to be bitchy to doctors for a living. It's kind of awesome. But I didn't start out in bitchy to doctor field. You can't major in bitchy to doctor. It's not a thing. But I majored in social work. Most of what I did for the bulk of my career was actually trauma care. I worked with survivors of sexual assault, particularly pediatric sexual assault. I worked with survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, survivors of crime. I'm an awesome person to have around on the absolute worst day of your life. So how does that translate into healthcare consulting? My kid almost died, is really the short version. There's more to the story, but that's where it starts. My son was 8. We went for what was supposed to be a formality doctor's appointment. His pediatrician had said, this isn't really what I think it is, but let's just send you here. We'll rule this out, and when they ruled it out, I'll send you where I really think you need to go. So we went for an ultrasound. We just did the ultrasound. And the ultrasound tech goes, they've never done this before? Like, no. She's like, really? Never? No. Just, huh. And you guys know that they tend to know a lot more than they're allowed to say. Exactly. That was my face. That was my whole body. So she goes, I'm going to email some pictures downtown to Children's Hospital, and then I'm going to go get the doctor. And then they disappeared for like 45 minutes. When the doctor came back, he looked at me, he goes, your child is medically fragile. I've already called the hospital. They have a bed waiting for you. Do not go home. Don't bother packing a bag. Whatever you need, your husband can bring to you after work. Go to the hospital. Go now. So that was the day when we walked in with a perfectly normal, healthy child, formality appointment, no big deal. 3 hours later, I was told that he had 10% kidney function between the two, and that if we had waited much longer, he wouldn't have gotten a diagnosis, but it probably would have happened at autopsy. So that was how I got into healthcare consulting, because I'm an awesome person to have around on the worst day of your life. Turns out I'm way less effective on the worst day of mine. All the trauma care and the trauma knowledge that you have, and like, this is how trauma impacts the brain, and this is what you do, and this is how you support somebody, and reflective listening, and appropriate use of physical touch, none of that matters when it's your kid on the table. So, we were there for about 3 months total. When we got there, he was almost dead. When we left, he was on dialysis. Don't worry, happy ending. He's 16 now, has a new kidney, all's right in the world. So, don't want to make you too sad. But at one point in that process, he had decided that The grown-ups could hold him down and make him get a blood draw, because again, needles are scary, we've already established this. If the grown-ups needed to do a surgery that was scary, we just sedate his ass and do it. He had no control over anything. We could hold him down, we could force him, we could drug him, whatever we needed to do was going to happen. Except for one really, really important thing when you're sick. Nobody can make you open your mouth if you don't want to. The jaw is one of the strongest muscles in the body, and it's full of sharp things called teeth. So he decided that the one thing he could control is nobody can make me take meds. And it would take hours, because he would take 23 pills a day, about 4 times a day. So at one point, about 2 weeks into this process, these 2 nursing students from Wayne State come in. And they've got us meds on a little tray, and they're all happy, perky med students, because they're with the kids, and they're going to save lives and be so impactful. And I look at them like, look at the time. And they go, why are we late? No, you're not late, but look at the clock. Seriously, look at the clock, both of you. Okay, why? Because this is the moment when one of the 2 of you decides that pediatrics is not for you. And they laughed. But 2 hours later, when they were still trying to get my kid to open his mouth, one of them looked at me and went, you know what, you're right, I think I like oncology better. What ended up happening was the nephrologist came in and looked at me and said, we're doing something. It's Friday afternoon. We're sending you and your son home for the weekend. You are going to get him to take his medication, or you're going to come back on Monday and we're going to put in a G tube. So for those of you that don't know, that's a tube that goes through your abdomen directly into your stomach, and at that point, we no longer need you to open your mouth. You're taking your meds. That, in 8 years of dealing with my son's health conditions, was the first and only time I've ever cried. Took him home. Back in his environment, back in his space, with his stuff, in our home, with his pets, and with his toys, and with everything that he needed. And I'm like, okay, look, we need to figure this out. We need to figure out what's going to make you do what we need to do, because this is terrifying for me, and you don't even know how bad it would be for you. So what's going on? Turns out one of the medications that they had him on, that he was supposed to take 3 tablets of 6 times a day, so 18 total, was bicarbonate of soda, baking soda. Raise your hand if you would want to take 18 spoonfuls of baking soda every day. Tastes like shit. But nobody had thought about this or really questioned it, because it's a phosphate binder, and when you have bad kidneys, you need to be protected from phosphate. Sodium bicarb takes the phosphates out, so you're going to take this. He's like, I don't want to take it. It's gross. It's scary. It's so much of it. I just can't. I can't. All the other pills I'm fine with. I can't. That's gross. And every time they bring me pills, they bring me those. So I'm just not opening my mouth. It's not going to happen. So, being what I would now hate to have in a patient, I jumped on Google. Dr. Google, the real doctor's nemesis. Turns out Tums are also a phosphate binder. But Tums taste like fruity candy and not like utter shit. So I called the doctor Sunday afternoon, and I'm like, I'm bringing him back on Monday. I think we got this figured out. I'm bringing it with me. I have the solution. I went to Target, bought the ginormous bottle of Tums. We walked in with that, set it on the table, said, figure out what the dosage is to equate to that, problem solved. All he needed was to have a voice in the process. All he needed was to have somebody listen to what was going on, to why he was objecting, to why he was saying no, to why it was such a big deal. But nobody did, because we were so mission focused. This pill will solve this problem will keep you alive, ergo, take this pill, end of discussion. There really was no discussion. There was talking at. When we got to discussion, that was when we got to resolution.
And I always hate following up that story, because like my son had kidney problems. And I'm like, I had an application security program that I was really concerned the Chinese.
We didn't do what we were told to do. We didn't give the tissue warning before we started.
Oh yeah, that's true too.
Tissue warning, there, done, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So when I was thinking about that, how oftentimes have we went to people and said, okay, you need to do this god-awful thing, and you have no choice in the matter because you must protect us, right? And application security is like the number one example of that. Thou shalt write this code. When I inherited a code base and was building my first SDL program, every single app had bad connections. Every single app was logging in clear text. I'm like, this is horrible. What are you doing? I'm like, you need to write it this way. You need to write it that way. And they're like, yeah. And they keep writing bad apps. And so I'd scan and I'd say, thou shalt fix. And they go, okay, we'll fix those 2 apps. And then all the new apps they wrote were bad, and all the same old apps were bad. And finally I sat down, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they're like, well, we were taught that the way you connect to the database is copying off the wiki. So we copy off the wiki and connect to the database, and then you scan and you tell us we screwed up, and then we enter a change request, and then we fix it, and then we go to build a new app, and we copy off the wiki, and like, where's that wiki? It's over there. Can anyone edit that wiki? Yeah, sure. Can you copy that? Copying's copying. Great. Problem solved. And everyone was happy. Same thing with encryption libraries. You try and have a developer, you should really encrypt everything. And they're going to go, where's that on Stack Overflow? But you give a developer something like Voltage. Voltage is actually like my favorite security tool right now. It's like the Tums of security. Because you're like, here's Voltage. It's 2 lines of code, and it'll do everything for you. And they're like, all the encryption? Yes, everything for you. And you won't scan and yell us? Yes, everything for you. And you won't keep bugging me? I promise, just use these 2 lines of code. They're like, I love you, man. More developers ask us for Voltage. Usually when we're doing like a Voltage deal, it's the developers leading it, not the security people enforcing it. So I love that concept, right? How do we find the Tums of the security controls? How do we listen and figure out how to make the people who are trying to do things empowered and figure out what their real problem is and address that? A lot of it is going back to moving people from those brains, right? Because they're scared or annoyed, or we pushed them into the reptilian brain and we need to pull them out. I mentioned earlier, it's like the limbic system, the cortex, the neocortex. If you guys have ever seen the TED Talk, Start With Why, there's also a great book, Start With Why. I love this concept. We're going to talk about the fear, and then we're going to have some great conversations to talk about what it means, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to do for it. It's shaping those conversations and having those messages, so we're effectively feeding the velociraptors and petting the monkeys, and getting people to the point where they're comfortable and they can do their job, and we're able to secure the system together. Damn it, Jim. I'm a doctor, not a veterinarian or a lizard wrangler. So how do you do that?
He makes me brag about myself. He told me not to say that he makes me, but he totally makes me.
I'm pretty sure it's in the notes, don't brag.
Yeah. So, like I said in the beginning, I work with about 480 doctors. Most of those are part of a really big provider network in Michigan. This is the part I will brag about. My provider network was just ranked #1 for patient engagement in the state of Michigan. So clearly we're doing something right. One of the things that we did recently was I was doing a half-day training, 4 hours for doctors on how to not be a dick. Start with your patient walking into the exam room, start with you walking them back out the door. When I can get the doctors to walk them out the door, they don't like that part. But it was 4 hours of don't be a dick instruction. One of the things that I did is I wanted to make it really easy for them. So I came up with 5 questions. What do you think's going on?
Can I pause for just a minute?
Yeah.
Those 5 questions that she's about to cover were then codified by the institution, and they're redoing all the name badges with those 5 questions on the back. So effectively taking engagement and making it a cultural thing, enforcing it. Imagine if you would, if we were so successful at security that HR went, you know what, I'm going to reprint all the name badges and tell people how not to fall for phishing. That'd be a huge win. I would celebrate that all day. Go ahead.
I almost didn't brag, and then you.
No, I'm talking about what it means for security.
So I did that. It was kind of cool. So these are the 5 questions. What do you think's going on? This leads into one of my favorite patient engagement stories. I had an internal medicine doc, so basic primary.
Hi folks, Iron Geek here. Unfortunately, I really need to find a replacement for these other medias. So we don't have any audio until about the 15-minute mark. Apologies to Wolf. We'll see what I can do about this for future conferences. We're having a lot of failures here at CircleCityCon this year for some reason. I'm not sure what the deal is, but sorry for the problems.
Right? Feed the raptor, pet the monkeys, empower the people so that when the attackers are coming in, we got all the right people in place. When the attackers are coming in, we don't have to be there on 24/7. When the attackers are coming in, we don't have to say, oh, I got breached, I don't know what to do. When the attacks come in, we've got everything in place so that they know what to do. We've thought about why it matters to them. We've created ways that they can be successful. We've given them the comms, and that we can stand a fighting chance of protecting our organization. And we can keep going to cons and having a good time, right? And 2 million jobs in 2020 is not going to happen if we keep pissing everybody off, really. So that's it. That's been Playing Doctor. I really appreciate you guys' time. So enjoy the conference. We'll be around for questions after.